Following the climate change conference in Copenhagen, many in the European media saw the summit as a failure. Low targets, goals dropped was a typical headline. Some claimed that Europeans were excluded when it mattered most. We sat down with two climate experts who see things very differently.
I've been traveling through Europe for the last 2 weeks talking to members of various governments, and I'm frankly astonished at this story that everyone seems to believe that somehow the Europeans were outside the room when the Copenhagen Accord was being negotiated at the UN Climate Summit in December. It's just simply not true.
The Alliance and many others would have preferred to see a binding agreement at Copenhagen. However, there were some real successes. Many of the achievements were initiatives that the EU has been spearheading for many years. All the major economies were on the table. There was an agreement to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, a fund for international adaptation, and a framework for verification and transparency of the reductions.
If you look at the European contribution to the meeting, it was absolutely essential for, first of all, getting Obama to go to Copenhagen, negotiate with global leaders, negotiate the idea of a political accord to be settled at Copenhagen, which might eventually be turned into a legally binding accord, and also to frankly stand up to the Chinese and pull them into some kind of framework in which they will agree to reducing their emissions with the other nations. And then finally, there are the details. The Europeans had already been leading and trying to persuade the US for over a year, really, on things like limiting temperature rise to 2 degrees C, to increasing their ambition on financing, eventually for developing countries, to look at 2020 targets on the order of contributions of $100 billion per year. And all throughout, if you look at the Copenhagen Accord, there are particular measures where the Europeans really were there.
Without the leadership of the EU, it's questionable whether we would have gotten to this point. Moving into the future, the leadership of the EU is increasingly important as they have the expertise in these areas, they have the policy experience, they've really blazed the trail on these issues. So we very much look forward to their continued leadership.